So welcome, everyone. I hate to stop all these great conversations, but we're going to have more of them. Just to get a sense, because I know we don't all know each other. I certainly don't know more than half of the people in this room. And I'm not going to ask you to all introduce yourself. But I am going to ask you maybe just to hold up your hands. How many of you are from, Acton? How many of you are from Maynard? Okay. And Hudson? Well, welcome, everybody. Oh, I didn't ask how many people from Stow? It was. Marlborough. Anybody else here from Marlborough? Right. Okay, so many of you know the person who just spoke, our Senator Jamie Eldridge, and he'll be speaking later. Up here we have Jim Snyder-Grant from Acton, for those of you. And next to Jim is, and this I have to look because otherwise I'm going to screw it up, and I'm probably going to screw it up anyways. Emma, that's easy. Thompson.
You can do it. Mine's an island.
Fiji.
There you go.
Emma Thompson, Fiji. And she's from Green Maynard. And Arnie Epstein from Stow. And the person whose location I screwed up, Patrick Thayer, and Patrick's from Hudson. So welcome to you guys particularly, and welcome to everybody else. What we're going to do is we're going to let each of them have about 10 minutes to update you on what they've been doing for the climate in their town. And as you listen to them, think about where are the connections, where are the overlaps, because the whole motivation for doing tonight was based upon the fact that we're all working on climate concerns in our individual towns, and with a few exceptions, we rarely know what each other is doing. But Mother Nature doesn't care where the town boundary is, and we could do a lot more together than we do today. And maybe after tonight, we'll begin to think more. I mean, it's not to say that none of us have worked. We did some projects with Hudson, which were terrific. But we haven't done any with Acton that I can think of, for example, or other towns. So the idea is to look for the connections and think about what we could do more of, better of for the climate, because we all know who each other are and what we're working on. So that's the point and purpose of tonight. We've got, at least 4 different town climate committees here. And most of us have heard of the other town's committee, but with rare exceptions, we haven't been able to work together. So I'm with Sustainable Stow. There's Green Maynard, Green Hudson, who am I forgetting? Acton. Green Acton. So by the end of the evening, hopefully we know more about what each other's towns and green organizations are doing so we can leave here thinking about projects for the future.
We really want this to be interactive, so questions from both sides. We expect the panels to ask you questions as well as you ask the panel so that we all could be learning together. Okay?
Any questions? If not, Green Maynard's going first. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm here from Green Maynard, and I'm going to talk a little bit. My name is Emma Thompson, Fiji. So founded in 2018, Green Maynard has grown into a community-driven force of environmental progress and resiliency. We have a small but mighty core group of volunteers, most of whom have been involved with our group since we were founded. Through collaboration with businesses, providing education for residents, and advocating with the town government, We're focused on reducing waste and emissions, protecting our local ecosystem, and helping residents feel informed and empowered with a lens on equity. What follows is a snapshot of what we've been able to accomplish in the last 8 years and our plans for the future. One of our most visible areas of impact has been local policy. In 2021, by working with businesses, residents, and town leaders, Green Maynard successfully passed 2 town bylaws preventing the use of single-use plastic bags and polystyrene food serviceware and packaging. Currently, we are working with the Board of Health to ensure businesses continue to comply with these bylaws. With the Board of Health, we put together a brochure and letter this winter and sent it to all Maynard food service businesses to remind them of the regulations and enforcement and to offer emotional support, not emotional support, to offer support as needed, and maybe some emotional support, yeah. I'm a social worker, so that's kind of my head. In 2022, we proposed the town's climate emergency declaration and conducted Maynard's greenhouse gas inventory, helping ensure that future climate action is grounded in solid data. In 2025, we supported a bylaw to ban rodenticides on town property, and a further bylaw prohibiting them from being used throughout the town is currently in process, which would apply to residences. Additionally, Green Maynard members continue to stay involved in town government with representation on the Sustainability Committee, the Conservation Commission, and the Trash Task Force. Education and community engagement have always been at the heart of our work. We participate in Maynard Fest on an annual basis and table at the farmers market every summer. We've held 2 Earth Day cleanup events in partnership with other community organizations. And we recently launched a coffee convening series to hear directly from residents, the first gathering dubbed the Winter Warm-Up. We've piloted an environmental group for kids called Sprouts and incorporated art contests to get the younger generation thinking about environmental issues in Maynard and beyond. We've also focused on creating accessible opportunities for practical, hands-on learning. Green Maynard hosted the Going Net Zero lecture series, which brought field experts to present on a variety of issues relevant to our community. We have co-sponsored annual Fix-It clinics with the Maynard Public Library, which our next one is actually this weekend, Saturday the 28th from 1 to 4. These clinics are troubleshooting and discovery workshops that allow community members to partner with neighbors with various technical expertise to fix broken items instead of sending them to the landfill. In 2023, Green Maynard conducted a waste audit at Maynard High School to demonstrate the savings from a compost option in the cafeteria. We worked alongside high school students and staff to compile and sort their lunch waste to get a better picture of the volume, contents, and feasibility. Protecting the Assabet River watershed has been another major focus. Green Maynard helped launch the Maynard Assabet River Coalition and has worked closely with ORS on river cleanups, water quality testing, and public education. Together, we've hosted presentations on the history and health of the river, helped recruit new water quality testers, and produced 1,000 brochures introducing new residents of the Rivage, I believe, at Acton, the new development that's alongside the Assabet, to caring for the Assabet. In 2025, we also hosted a riverfront garden tour of native wetland gardens, highlighting the important connection between healthy landscapes and clean water. We hosted a tree identification walk alongside the Blue-Green Trail and Northern Wetlands with forest ecologist Neil Pedersen. We also have a Dark Skies Coalition working to pass a spring town lighting bylaw that limits lumens and requires covers on outdoor fixtures. Alongside this bylaw, we have supported several talks and presentations about the importance of dark skies in an effort to educate residents and the town about alternatives to traditional outdoor lights, which are harmful to wildlife and the natural ecosystem. Green Maynard is looking forward to hosting a Dark Skies Week this April with presentations and activities for children and adults to continue this education. And that bylaw will be going into our spring town meeting. With our 501c4 status, active communication platforms, and a growing network of engaged residents, Green Maynard is well positioned to continue moving this work forward. The key to our success is the dedication of our core group of volunteers and supporters and the dynamic partnerships we share with government offices and other volunteer entities in town. We look forward to working closely with the new solid waste coordinator in publicizing the next trash contract and the new town public compost option. Green Maynard is often called upon to publicize new town initiatives, and we also anticipate working closely with the new energy manager. In the future, we see our focus on the Maynard-Assabet River Coalition growing through our investment in increasing education, engagement, and stewardship of the Assabet River. We also hope to form a group of volunteers to help with vernal pool crossings this upcoming spring. We're grateful to have been included in this forum and look forward to increased collaboration with other towns groups focused on sustainability and environmental justice. Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Patrick Thayer from Green Hudson.
I forgot the mic. Okay. Is this the right distance? Okay, sweet. I set the timer so I don't go over. Okay. I'm Patrick Thayer. I am representing Green Hudson at this event tonight. I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission in Hudson, but I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight. So Green Hudson has been around for several years and has focused a lot on policy changes and also waste reduction and also energy sustainability within Hudson. And we have set out with one of our goals is educating the community in Hudson. And so we have aimed to do this over the last several years, 5 years, with a zero waste goal for a lot of Hudson's town festivals. So every June we have Hudson Fest, there's Spirit of Hudson, Beer Fest, there's winter holiday festivals. And as one of the major pushes of Green Hudson has been educating the public on how to recycle or how to compost, what goes in what bin. And that has been one of our main focuses. And so we have done this through various outreach at these events, whether it's a booth in which people can learn about recycling, composting, even to the point where Green Hudson, along with a team of volunteers, runs a lot of the recycling, trash sorting at these events to make sure that everything ends up in the right bin. We talk to people when they bring the trash up, which bin it should go in. And this is sort of with the focus of how do we convey this education to people in Hudson, but also other communities, right? A lot of people come to Hudson, go to the festivals, go basically to the restaurants. Can they leave Hudson with an idea of how they can be more sustainable in their own daily lives? Let me switch to the next one. And so this sort of laid the groundwork for a lot of our policy focuses in Hudson. A couple of years ago, we passed a plastic bag ban, which kind of laid the groundwork for a broader legislative victory we had at town meeting in spring, which is a very broad plastic reduction initiative. And essentially what we focused on is how to educate the public on how a lot of these containers given out by restaurants, used by grocery stores, used by other shops, are basically non-recyclable in Massachusetts. Even though they have the little arrows with the 6 or the 5 in them, a lot of them cannot be recycled. And so through a lot of outreach, talking to our businesses, we were able to pass this, and overwhelmingly, which was a big surprise for us, honestly, because the town meeting that it happened at had the Prop 2.5 override, very well-attended town meeting. There was over 1,000 people there. And it passed essentially like 700 to 6 or something ridiculous. And so this kind of put us, in sort of a interesting position, is that there's a lot of stuff we have to enforce now in Hudson. And so luckily, we have a great working relationship with with our Board of Health and also our health director, which is critical in a lot of these initiatives. Someone that we can work with, how do we educate the restaurants, how do we translate the regulations into Portuguese and Spanish and other languages, just so everyone knows how to follow. But also, most importantly, how do we work with these restaurants? And so something we really focus on in Hudson is really the positive business case for plastic reduction, especially among people in my generation. A lot of times we make choices based on sustainability at the restaurants, right? It's like, I usually don't order stuff again from restaurants I get a styrofoam takeout from, for example. And so really selling to the business that this is good for your business, this will reduce waste, this will help the community. A lot of our local businesses that Hudson prides themselves on, the downtown, really came on board with basically this initiative. And that really helped us pass this. I'll go to the next slide. And so we are already starting to see success in Hudson. These are some images. The bylaw has been in effect. For basically example, pictures from, in the past, those veggies used to be on black plastic. Now they're on clear plastic. Even Market Basket started experimenting with paper packaging. They basically transitioned their rotisserie chickens over to white plastic rather than black plastic. A step in the right direction, but at least it's recyclable. And basically, Jackie, our resident recycling expert that's at the transfer station a lot, shared a picture last week, and that there was no black plastic takeout containers in the recycling waste, which is good because contamination in these waste streams cause a lot of these other stuff that can be recycled to be rejected. And so we're just starting to enforce this and really working closely with the Board of Health, educating people, talking to restaurants that are out of compliance, how they can get into compliance. And I would love to talk to people how we can expand this to other towns. And happy to talk about that in the question and answer afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so something else I just want to highlight is, and I feel it's kind of under talked about, and this whole climate change, is the effect of climate change on our forest. So the reason I really got involved in Hudson was because just up here during COVID, you have a lot of free time. I got very interested in flowers, right? Native plants, native flowers, pollinators. And part of it I started to realize is that, a lot of our forests are full of invasive plants. If you go in any woods, there's tons of non-native plants that have taken over the understory. And so I wanted to try to figure out how to solve this, and I started organizing volunteers on the Conservation Commission to remove it. And so, for example, this is Japanese barberry on the left. It basically forms a monoculture. And the reason why it gets in our forest is because droughts, heat, legacy harvesting opens up for these plants to come in. And it's not just, it looks ugly. It's also a public health risk, right? There are studies that show that in forest with barberry monocultures, there are about 15 times as many ticks with Lyme disease as there are without. And so these plants change our environment, and climate change accelerates them. And so after it's removed, you kind of have a dormer forest. And really the cool thing, you go to the next slide, is you start seeing the native plants return, right? And so there's I think that's a baneberry. On the left side is a white geranium. Here's some Jack and the Popus coming up from under the previous monocultures. And so that's something that in Hudson, this isn't directly a Green Hudson thing, but I want to bring it into Green Hudson, is how do we maintain our public lands? Because climate change also affects that. And for example, you can see it if you drive to the east of Hudson towards Sudbury, the Marlborough-Sudbury State Forest, all those red pine trees, they are dying because of heat stress. And those will be replaced by invasive plants like Norway maples and other stuff. So it's something that a little bit at a time, we're working on kind of how do we approach it. It's not the most fun work if you've ever been ripping out plants for 2 hours on a Saturday in the woods, but it is definitely rewarding. So love to talk more about that. And I think that basically covers it.
So our next speaker from Green Acton is Jim Snyder-Grant.
Good evening. It's great to be here. My deep thanks to Sustainable Stow, the First Parish Climate Task Force, and Stow's Green Advisory Committee in putting this event together. Let's see, a bit about me. As far as I know, there are only 2 Snyder grants. That's my wife Dana, who used to be named Dana Snyder, and me, I was Jim Grant back in the previous century. We've lived at New View Co-Housing on Half Moon Hill in West Acton for all of this century and a bit more. 6 years ago, I made the awkward transition from climate activist to select board member. In 3 months, I'll be off the board and back to being, one of those people that gets to show up at the select board meetings and tell them how to do their jobs. I look forward to this with impish delight. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about Acton's path towards addressing the climate crisis. And also I want to mention that this talk, along with many links, is available at greenacton.org/Feb24. It's probably even going to be on a slide. Is that right, Sharon? No. Okay, then let me say it again. greenacton.org/Feb24. Even if you want to follow along. There's also a QR code and a link on the table over there. So between Acton's first emissions inventory, which covered the year 2017, and the latest inventory covering 2024 and just completed a few weeks ago, our town-wide greenhouse gas emissions have gone down by almost 25%. Yeah. I'm tremendously proud of what Acton's been able to do, and scared that it's nowhere near enough. We're people here who care about keeping our climate within the bounds that usually have supported civilizations in the past. And so we often need to find ways to motivate ourselves to move forward in the face of unknown but large odds. That's why it's so important that we have gatherings like this. So what has Acton done to get those reductions? I'm going to highlight a few things. 2 years ago, we stopped digging the hole deeper on emissions from new buildings. Town meeting approved banning the use of fossil fuels piped into new construction. State legislation allowed up to 10 towns to opt into this fossil fuel-free construction pilot, and maybe we'll hear from Jamie about how and when other towns can participate. To deal with the other 98% of our buildings that aren't new, we've provided a lot of education, training, and persuasion. Our most successful program is the free Clean Energy Coach Program. At this point, a dozen volunteers have been trained to provide coaching on electrification, including solar, heat pumps, electric vehicles, batteries to residences and businesses. That group has now helped more than 350 households so far, and the program is going strong. To reach more people with general information, a number of dedicated activists work on an effort called Energize Acton in cooperation with the town. Part of this effort is built on a web software platform from the nonprofit Mass Energize. Our volunteers have built a website with detailed information on actions that people can take. Now, I should say right now that the website is in a technical transition, so if you rushed there right now, you would have old information, but wait a couple weeks, it'll be up to date. The Energize Acton folks have organized many events, about one a month for the last few years, including our popular EV petting zoo, where people can talk to EV owners and see their cars. There have been home tours, book readings, plant-based food potlucks, and more. Let's see, over there somewhere, is Karen Root Watkins? Yeah, there she is. Okay, she's the leader at Energize Acton. You can talk to her for more information. The events are really important because they build community, and as we figured out already, community is key foundation for being able to do this work. Partly because of educational efforts and partly because of general trends, our biggest emissions reductions have been in transportation. Purchase of hybrids continues to rise. Purchase of pure electric vehicles, while still smaller than the number of hybrids, is catching up. After installing a series of level 2 chargers at town buildings and the train station with grants from Eversource and the state, last year Acton opened up its first level 3 fast DC chargers at the corners of 2A and 27, entirely paid for with grants from the state and Eversource. How did we get to be able to do all those great things in the last few years? I wanted to sketch out the path Acton took in case that's helpful for others. In 2010, after enthusiastic lobbying by activists, Acton joined the state's Green Communities program. A couple of years after that, the town committee that worked with the Green Communities program, the Green Advisory Board, commissioned the town's first emissions study. The first joint project that I can remember between activists and town staff in local climate-related work was our participation in Solarize Acton in 2012, a program to add a lot of solar to businesses and residences. This was funded by the late, great state-funded Solarize program. A few years after that, in 2019, Green Acton, which is our town's umbrella environmental group, and I should pause a moment to note that Green Acton works with committees. So the big five are water and land use and biodiversity and materials and energy. Okay, I remembered the big five. So what Green Acton did back in 2019 was decide to work on passing a climate emergency declaration at an Acton town meeting. That led to organizing dozens of groups into a Acton Climate Coalition, which then led to an overwhelmingly positive vote for a strong declaration at town meeting. That declaration in 2020 called for a target date of 2030 for reaching net zero in Acton. And I remember feeling at the time that that was both ridiculously ambitious and maybe not enough. So I think as climate activists, we're in that kind of tension a lot, where so much has to happen, and how? After that, after the declaration passed, our relatively new, relatively young town manager, John Mangiarotti, came to the select board and said that it was becoming clear to him how much the people of Acton and the select board wanted to make real progress on climate, and that he needed to find a way to get a full-time staff person to work on this. So he rearranged some budget items and hired Andrea Becerra, who became our amazing sustainability director. With support from climate activists, town staff, and a majority of the select board, all those programs that we mentioned above happened, and many others. They kept coming. The town was especially good at grant writing to keep moving forward in the midst of typical town constraints on spending. We've gotten useful grants for climate-related projects from a whole variety of state agencies, and also from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the MAPC, and from state and federal legislative earmarks. We also use an energy efficiency fund that was established in 2012 by an act of the legislature that has money flowing into it from solar projects in town that are paying Acton payments in lieu of taxes. That fund has been key in funding insulation and air sealing and electrification projects in town buildings. Keeping up with grant requirements also helped move us forward with creating an EV first policy for the town, where departments must consider if an electric vehicle would meet the town's needs before buying new vehicles. The town also has had a series of projects to plan and then implement the electrification of town buildings. Our new fire station and our newest school are both all electric with ground source heat pumps. Yeah, those were both great things to see. Our recent progress has allowed Acton to be one of the state's first participants in the Climate Leader Program, which is sort of a follow-up to the Green Communities Program. Our town's Climate Action Plan and the Climate Action Tracker, developed by staff with support from a grant from the MAPC and lots of public outreach, sketches out where we need to go from here. 3 major goals include reducing the impact of town-wide electricity use by continuing changes in the town's electrical aggregation program called Acton Power Choice. working with the state and the utilities in planning and implementing a transition away from natural gas in Acton, and a successful implementation of our gas leaf blower ban, which starts taking effect next year. The Climate Action Plan acknowledges that many of our future plans require significant state and federal support. The state does what it can, and it's been really helpful, but the biggest programs will require legal and financial support from the federal government, and that support has largely been turned off. The plan and the climate declaration also acknowledge that Acton is just one town among so many, so that success in the long run requires coordinating and cooperating with other towns and allowing and encouraging the spread of good ideas and the mutual encouragement of each other's goals. So I'm so glad that this event and others like it are helping to move things forward amongst all the challenges we face. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Arnie Epstein.
Wow.
Somebody else.
It's a difficult act to follow. Yes, good evening. I'm Arnie Epstein, chair of Stow's Green Advisory Committee. In Stow, there are two sustainability groups. Sustainable Stow is a volunteer group that was founded 14 years ago and has been key to town outreach and sustainability initiatives, including tonight's forum. The Green Advisory Committee is a formal town committee established 5 years ago. We work with other town departments, Stow residents, and of course, Sustainable Stow. We developed and oversee Stow's Climate Action Plan and led initiatives to adopt the Specialized Energy Code, the Plastic Bag Reduction Bylaw, and last year's designation of Stow as a climate leader. And happy to hear that both Acton and Stow are one of the first communities to get that designation. So this slide. Yes, so Stow has become a climate leader, and this is just a overview of some of the accomplishments in Stow. There are 2,700 households in the town, and we'll take a look at on the next slide how these metrics are used to measure our progress towards our climate goals. A number of residential solar and heat pump installations resulted from the townwide initiatives led by Sustainable Stow, the Stow Solar Challenge, and the joint Hudson Stow Heat Smart program. As a result of these programs, over 10% of Stow households expressed interest in each of these. And although all did not install either rooftop solar or heat pumps, it did succeed in making residents aware of the benefits of making these changes and more likely to adopt them in the future. So if we go to the next slide, it's a little bit busy, but hope to explain what we're doing with the numbers that you saw on the previous slide. So the Stow Select Board adopted the goal of aligning the town with the greenhouse gas emissions targets established in the climate roadmap legislation signed by Governor Baker in 2021. This legislation established an aggressive interim target for 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. Most greenhouse gas emissions in the state are from buildings, transportation, and electricity. In Stow, homes and private vehicles account for about 90% of total town emissions. The state developed a climate plan where the number of installed heat pumps is a proxy for the emissions from buildings, and the number of electric vehicles is a proxy for the emissions from transportation. The two graphs on this slide illustrate the progress in Stow towards meeting the state emissions targets for buildings and vehicles. The blue line on the left-hand graph is the percent of homes with heat pumps installed in Stow, and on the right-hand graph, it is the percent of vehicles that are either all-electric or plug-in hybrids through 2024. The 2030 target for both buildings and vehicles is 17%. And while progress is needed, I believe Stow is on track to meet that goal. Again, take a look at the blue line on the left and the blue line on the right. The red line in both of these graphs represent the overall state average, both for heat pump installations and vehicles across the state. So, as you can see, Stow has been very successful so far in getting to the point we're at and hopefully meeting those 2030 targets, which has been our focus. Just a word on electricity. Stow electricity is provided by a municipal light plant, Hudson Light and Power, where 90% of electric generation is non-greenhouse gas emitting. The town, because of that, the town has far exceeded the goal for the electric sector for 2030 and even 2040. So the next slide. So just again to highlight some of our accomplishments, we spoke earlier a bit about the Stow Solar Challenge. We had over 200 households have their homes evaluated for rooftop solar. Out of those 200, we had 59 installed rooftop solar from that program. As I said earlier, we have over 100 homes currently with rooftop solar. With the joint Stow-Hudson Heat Smart program, again, we had over 200 homeowners have their homes evaluated for heat pump installations and got a quote. From that number, we had 53 heat pumps installed in Stow, and currently, I believe the number is well over 300. Last year, along with the town of Acton and I think 17 other communities in the state, is that right?
I think so.
Stow was one of 19 communities designated as a climate leader, and we're currently looking to use the $1 million grant that accompanies that designation to do a partial decarbonization of our middle school, Hale Middle School. And we were, just this past December, Stow was honored by the state to be designated the leading by example community. So there's a picture on the top left with Sharon doing a presentation for our Heat Smart initiative at our town hall, and on the bottom right there's a picture of the award ceremony for the leading by example designation. So thank you very much.
Now, I have the privilege of having Senator Jamie Eldridge share his view from the Beacon Hill.
So thank you so much, and thank you so much to Rick and Sharon and so many of the organizers here in Stow for organizing tonight's forum, and just really proud to represent these four communities that you've heard climate leaders on. So really, really proud of their great work. And looking out in the audience, and I know Rick and Sharon have been there, and I think probably most people here, is that I do want to put in a pitch as far as communities collaborating and learning best practices, is that every 3 months I have something that I formed shortly after becoming a state senator called the Green Advisory Council, GAC. And so that's usually we meet on a Saturday morning. I think we'll be meeting in April, probably to go over the climate legislation that hopefully by then will have passed both the House and the Senate. So certainly can get the word out to everyone here about that, but it's a great way to compare notes and see what other communities are doing. So I first of all, I just want to say, just to give a little bit of perspective, is that it's really the advocacy of folks such as yourself that are the reason that the legislature is passing now really every session climate legislation. I was serving in the House of Representatives in 2008, and that's when the sort of first major climate legislation, the Green Communities Act, the Global Warming Solutions Act, the Green Jobs Act. So that was sort of like the first wave in some ways a couple decades. And then it was passing bills, maybe every 4 to 6 years. Well, now the past 4 sessions, including this one, we will be passing climate legislation every session. And you really should give yourselves a pat on the back because, as someone who works on a wide variety of issues, usually when the legislature takes up a major issue, then we sort of put it aside for 4 to 6 years. The fact that now it's become an expectation for us to take up climate legislation every session really is a testament to how strong and active and broad the climate coalition is. So really grateful to you for that. Please give yourselves a hand. And what I'm first going to do, because I've already started getting some questions about it, and I know that Tina Krasowski is not here, but we also know she's here in spirit because she had emailed me that she already has most of the summary of the House climate bill that will be being debated this Thursday. And probably those that have read any of the news today, there's an immediate focus on some of the concerns on the bill, including reducing spending on mass save. And I won't comment too much on that other than sort of with a focus on sort of the politics of where things are right now with respect to energy, is that, and I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but the word affordability, right? Lots of different takes on that, but I will say that I think there's a lot of pressure on elected officials to find ways to lower electric bills. I am someone, and I think probably most people here are in agreement, is that the clean energy fees, the mass save programs, et cetera, are good investments that not only save people money, but long term, are going to create even greater savings as well as just clean energy in general. But just to have a sense that, there is that pressure for the legislature to find ways, even if it's either short term or somewhat superficial, to quote unquote lower people's utility bills. So on the sort of positive note, just going through the details of the bill, it does continue to retain the commitment to carbon emissions reductions, including the 2030 goals. So that's really key, and that's really thanks to so much the advocacy people here that did a lot of advocating when the original bill came out. Retaining the use of social benefits of emissions reductions and assessing energy policies. In addition to it supports wide expansion of solar, including balcony solar for renters, adds more support for geothermal. And on the sort of worker side, because I will say it's really important to emphasize that there are a lot of the traditional energy workers, pipe fitters, gas fitters, et cetera, that are worried about losing their jobs, right? And we need to make sure to maintain that commitment to transitioning people into other work around, obviously, clean energy, but adding labor protections for geothermal workers and for displaced gas workers, ensures a moderate income utility discount rate, preserves access to mass save benefits in fossil fuel-free communities. There was a concern that fossil fuel-free communities, including Acton, was going to then be ineligible for mass save, so that's not in the bill. So that's good. And then preserving access to mass save benefits for developers of affordable housing. So clearly there's a focus on trying to reduce mass saves investments. In talking to Senator Barrett on the Senate side, the Senate chair of the Energy Committee, am opposed to reductions in mass save. But that just gives you an idea. I'm sure a lot of the advocacy groups will be giving their assessments, probably, by tomorrow about the bill, and there'll be amendments filed and things. But really, I think all things considered, it's encouraging. And in terms of what I've worked on as your state senator, and things that obviously I'm advocating for in not only the climate bill, but hopefully people are aware that Governor Healy has also passed a environmental bond bill, which is we every 5 years we pass bond bills on different issues. So this year is the environmental bond bill, and it's so important to remember that that's just as important as far as protecting open space, protecting our air, protecting our water in combating climate change. But as far as the climate bill, the Senate will obviously do its own version of the climate bill. So I filed 2 major solar bills that not only increases the goal for solar across the state, but it allows for automated permitting for solar at the municipal level, which we hear is kind of a barrier to getting more solar built. Interconnection improvements, which I know is a real frustration for a lot of projects. Net metering modification, raising the municipal hosting capacity from 10 megawatts to 20 megawatts. Portable solar recognition, which would exempt plug-in solar technology from unnecessary interconnection requirements. Virtual power plant requirements, and procurements that utilities must procure all cost-effective energy efficiency measures before more expensive supply resources. So those are just some of the aspects of the 2 bills. They're called the Mosaic Act and the Facilitating DERS Bill Act, Distributed Energy Resources. So hoping to get that into the Senate bill. So the House bill obviously will be taken up first on Thursday, and then hopefully I would hope within a month the Senate would pass its bill, and then it goes to conference committee. So that's really important. I know that many of the panelists mentioned the realities of cities and towns need more funding to carry out the vision of each of your towns or cities. So a bill that I filed, and it's going to require more advocacy, but one of the challenges I think we're really seeing is, look, we've passed these major climate laws, but the reality is, aside from the compact around carbon emissions, which people here are probably familiar that Pennsylvania just withdrew from it, so it's becoming that many states that are part of the compact. Is revenue, is finding more dedicated revenue so there's money for you to carry out your vision and obviously help meet the goals of our 2030 and 2050 goals. So one of the major bills is called the AHEAD Act, which is focused on both affordable housing and climate resiliency. So that bill has been reported out of the Revenue Committee. I chair the Revenue Committee, and basically it's a deeds excise fee, and half of the money would go to the Global Warming Solutions Act, and half the money would go to the Affordable Housing Trust. Making the point, which I think, we all get, is that, of course, climate impacts are really negatively affecting housing, whether, flooding, whether, rising home insurance rates. So anyhow, the idea is to sort of bring together these different groups around affordable housing and climate resilience and climate action to sort of build a coalition similar to the Community Preservation Act, which passed in 2000. I know a lot of communities have taken advantage of that. So that is legislation that has a strong coalition behind it. I would also say that any discussion of, quote unquote, raising taxes, even though this is technically a fee, is difficult in Beacon Hill, but trying to make the point that if we're really serious about meeting our climate goals, we need to find more dedicated revenue sources to invest in our communities. It's estimated it would raise around $300 million a year, and then towns and cities could apply for that funding. So it's out of committee, but still has some challenges. And then I'll just sort of close and say that the other major bill I talked about is the environmental bond bill. So, and that's an opportunity to reauthorize programs like the MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Fund. So a lot of the bond bill is just reauthorizing programs. So, again, clean water, clean air, protecting open space, as well as MVP. I have filed a bill that really was the brainchild of Kate Crosby, who, as far as Acton and Acton-Boxborough goes, was really, sort of the visionary, first visionary behind, finding a way to reduce energy costs and do our part to combat climate change, including in the school district, is to allow MVP money for communities to hire or create a sustainability director position. And we know that when a community has a sustainability director, and I think from Jim's presentation, you can see, that you really are able to, to have a staff person for Acton. It's Andrea Becerra it's able to focus on that and spend all of her time getting grants and assisting other town departments. Is extremely helpful. So hoping that the MVP money can be used to help other communities, create sustainability director positions. I know that many towns, including I believe Maynard, you share a sustainability director? Not yet. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well.
We would love one.
Okay. Well, this bill is designed for that. So. So that's one bill. Patrick talked about impacts on forests and the impact of heat. One of my major bills is the drought management bill. So here we are in the middle of winter. The governor just announced that pretty much every part of Massachusetts is facing drought conditions. So this would empower the DEP to regulate water use. So we all see the signs, usually at our downtown or street corner that says, you have to restrict water use. Well, we all know that water is, of course, passing municipal borders. This would empower the state to look at it from a regional perspective and restrict water use from a regional point of view. So it's probably most of the environmental groups' major priority, so we're trying to attach that to the environmental bond bill. So that's the drought management bill. It's Senate 586. And then the last thing that I will mention is a bill that sometimes doesn't get a lot of attention, but I do think it would help as more towns and cities are passing bylaws to do your part to combat climate change, is an act relative to the effective enforcement of municipal ordinances and bylaws. So your city or town passes a bylaw, but right now the fines are very modest. Often the best example is someone who unfortunately cuts down trees, next to a conservation area, that he or she or they think is part of their property, and it turns out not to be. So it's updating the fines for that to really give more teeth to your building enforcers, your conservation commission, etc. So again, a bill that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I am hoping to attach it to the environmental bond bill. So I would just finish and say is when you're thinking about your advocacy, and again, the climate groups will have more, a better summary for the House energy bill, but I am very encouraged by that, and that really is the advocacy, I think, of everyone here in this room. Obviously, if there are things that aren't in the House bill, please contact your senator, please contact me about what should be in the Senate bill. And then the environmental bond bill is already on the Senate side, and so I'm hoping that will be taken up in April. So I think the spring is going to be a really big time for major climate and environmental bills. And all of that work, funding, et cetera, helps all the panelists here and all of you work to reach the goals that we need to move the Commonwealth forward. So again, thanks so much for having me, and great to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
So it's time for questions and observations, but you're going to have to come up here and use a mic, just like I almost did. Come on up.
Thank you. Andy Platt from Acton. Jamie, you always are greedy on our behalf, and it's terrific what you've done. On Thursday, I'm going to be at the State House. As you know, I mentioned that to you. I need some arguments, but what I'm concerned about is we've had 2 or 3 reports tonight of towns that have really benefited from Mass Save. I mean, you didn't necessarily speak a lot about Mass Save, but in terms of, you know, we're living examples of people who've taken advantage of it with the incentives and everything. So the question I have is, yes, affordability, but help me connect the dots for saving on electric bills when $1 billion, as I understand it, is being cut on Mass Save, which is a lot. It started with overhead problems or administrative problems. Maybe you need to reform some things. But now suddenly, we're down $1 billion. So that's worrisome.
Great. As I sometimes joke, thank you for the easy question, Andy. Yeah, no, it is frustrating. I think that, you know, I will say that I do hear from a lot of constituents that, you know, have had frustrations with Mass Save. So, you know, maybe the, you know, Mass Save, you know, consultant or the company comes to do the energy audit, and, you know, they don't get much either, you know, positive feedback or a plan to how to, you know, lower their energy bills, even though there's plenty of examples of very positive experiences. And I will say the one thing I meant to mention is we had a presentation with the Clean Energy Caucus of the State House from the Mass Community Climate Bank, so MCCB, that listed, and they only have about $50 million a year, but they displayed all of these incredible programs, how they were able to reduce energy use and put in heat pumps and solar. So there's so many positive examples. But I think that, you know, I think there has been frustration with the Mass Save program, whether that's some people say they don't like that utilities are running it, that it should be, you know, run independently, or that people have had, you know, frustrations with just the program itself, or just that it appears, you know, kind of superficially as a way to quote unquote save people money, even though we know that it doesn't. So certainly I think the Senate is very, you know, vigilant of that, and I'm, you know, hoping you won't see that in the Senate bill, and obviously we'll see what happens on the House side. I would imagine there'll be some amendments filed before Thursday. So. Thank you.
Arnie, is this working? Thank you. I would love to know how you guys are getting data, the metrics on the numbers of heat pumps in your town, because we have not figured out how to do that effectively.
It's a terrific question. Yeah, so metrics and tracking our progress has been a challenge. And just to put in a word, Jim, I heard you just updated your greenhouse gas inventory based on, did you say 2022 data? 2024, because I know that our original greenhouse gas inventory was based, as yours was, on 2017 data. That's what our baseline was based on, and that was because at the time, and we did it with MAPC as well, that was the latest data that was available. And at the state level, the latest greenhouse gas inventory that's available is from 2022. That's why I thought you had updated it based on 2022 data. So the state is 3, almost 4 years behind in reporting state-level greenhouse gas inventory. We won't know, for example, whether we've met our 2030 greenhouse gas emissions limits until 2033 or 2034. I mean, that really, I don't think is acceptable. But getting back to your initial question, so what are we doing to measure our progress? So first of all, I'd like to put in a pitch for the vehicle data. That comes from the Mass DOT has put up a terrific vehicle inventory website that breaks down vehicles by type, by community. So I can go on that website and just pick out Stow, and it will tell me how many all-electric vehicles, how many plug-ins, how many hybrids. And so I can give you that number down to the, you know, individual vehicle. And, you know, I think Mass DOT deserves a lot of credit for that. For the heat pumps, so what we're doing is we're just tracking the number of Hudson Light and Power heat pump rebates that are issued to Stowe residents. So unlike Acton, I think, Stowe is something like 2/3 fuel oil and maybe 25% or a little bit less pipeline gas, and then the balance is, a little bit of propane. But what we're basing this on, what we're assuming is that anybody who installs a heat pump would know about the Hudson Light and Power incentive, and they might double dip. If they are also a natural gas user, they could get the Mass Save heat pump incentive as well, but we do not get the Mass Save data to that granularity. So all of the data that I showed up there was just reports that I get every quarter from our utility, Hudson Light and Power, on the number of rebates that they've issued in the previous quarter.
I'm imagining Eversource is not going to be that cooperative on that front somehow.
And I'll put in one, now that I've got the mic, I'm going to put in one pitch. One of the issues that we have in Stowe in trying to measure our progress is that we, as I mentioned, we're like 2/3 fuel oil, and there is no state data collection mechanism to, require the fuel oil distributors to report on a community basis the amount of fuel oil that they've delivered to customers in that particular community. So when you install a heat pump, you don't know, for example, whether it's a partial home installation or a full home installation. The state is taking some guesses at that as well, and they developed that proxy that I mentioned earlier. But Mr. Senator Eldridge, I've got your ear. What I'd really like to see is some regulation that requires fuel oil distributors to report how much fuel that they've delivered, per community per year, and that would give us the ability to say, how much reduction have we really achieved in the amount of really displaced from the use of heat pumps. Long-winded answer to your question. Sorry.
And thank you, Arnie. I'll take a look at that. Absolutely appreciate it.
Jim, you mentioned the loss of federal incentives, and it seems as though one area where that is being felt really hard is in solar. And a lot of you have mentioned like solarized programs or special outreach to homeowners. And I saw an ad recently for something called Massachusetts Solar Smart 3.0. And I just wonder if any of you know about it and could speak to it, and if that's a way that we could promote solar even though we've lost the federal incentives.
Yeah, so the Smart 3.0 program has been promulgated, so that, that's continuing the SREC program for developers for solar. So that's good. I know that, certainly I hear from a lot of solar developers that say that it's not, that it's not robust enough, that part of the value is going away. I've heard from other solar developers say that it's good. I think, Karen, an area where I'd like to see the legislature step up is that we should, we're never going to be able to supplant the federal, tax incentive for solar. It's just that the state doesn't have, that kind of money. But we certainly should be increasing, the tax credit, whether for solar or for heat pumps or for EVs. And so I would like to see us do that, and there are some bills that do increase some of those credits. Don't have to tell anyone here that it's looking like a difficult budget year, but I certainly those are things that many of us are advocating for. So
is that something where the state can, I mean, it just seems like solar makes so much sense for the grid. And yet, you know, how can we make that economic argument and have sort of ISO New England and the electricity grid on our side?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it gets recorded, your comment.
Oh, did you want the thing? Microphone?
I forget my question now.
It's about making sure ISO is...
Yeah, I guess I just wonder, I mean, it just seems like solar makes so much sense for our grid, economic sense. And, you know, how can we make that argument to the utilities and to the grid and to, you know, the voters in Massachusetts?
Absolutely. I won't embarrass anyone in the crowd, but probably most people here know I'm very active on social media, where I have some who have different views on clean energy, and thank those here in the audience that you know, have the data and knowledge to show that clean energy is actually reducing, you know, costs. I do think that's a real battle, is the more specific examples, whether it's solar or geothermal, offshore wind, et cetera, can show that that's actually reducing people's costs or you know, people's projects in their homes, the more to counteract the narrative that clean energy is, you know, too expensive and we should just continue to expand our reliance on gas. So that's not a complete answer, but those are my thoughts. Is I think we really need to find a way to educate people in the middle. That's why the energy coaching is so excellent, but we need to, you know, turn that in some ways to real specific examples of projects. So.
Thank you. So I am very worried about biodiversity and land clearing, and I'm really excited that this group is coming together. 350 Mass Metro West node actually has a municipal checklist. It's out of date. We'd love somebody to take that over and make it new so that we can all be checking off the stuff that everybody else is doing. So having like a master database of stuff we can do. The other thing is that I was really encouraged that the climate bill that I looked at was not encouraging more new building. I feel like, actually the data is that the size of Paris is cleared every day on the earth. And if you look at all these towns that were represented here, we're talking 3 or 4 acres a week. Okay, so please be aware of this. And I was really excited that Jamie helped with like the housing miracle of devonscrest.org, which saved 114 apartments from a ruthless developer that is now more affordable for the renters and they are getting all retrofitted with insulation, et cetera. And so I feel like, I hope, Jamie, that you can figure out how to reverse the trend where the housing funding is 99.8% for new building and only 0.2% for preservation, and reverse that and have it be for almost all preservation. And let's save these houses and help the renters and at the same time help the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I think one of the real challenges, and I have to say I don't have the answers, is how do we build more solar on commercial buildings? Obviously, you see a lot on houses, but I think, unfortunately, most commercial buildings, or at least owners, are not embracing solar. It certainly is, I believe, more expensive to put up on commercial buildings, or sometimes more of a challenge as far as, you know, what a lot of roofs look like in commercial buildings. But we really need to find a solution for that.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Millard from Green Hudson. I have 2 different questions, so I'll say them both, and whoever can answer them, that would be great. The first one is, there is also Heat Smart Alliance coaching, and I just wanted to put that out there, that exists for us, and I've been through that training, and people can go through it. But I was thinking more locally that it sounds like Acton, yours is a little broader than ours in terms of what the coaches can talk about. So I'm just envisioning, did your sustainability director do that training?
The first round of coaches were trained via a contract with Abode Energy Management of Concord. The second round was done through free courses from Electrify America, plus us training ourselves as we had more expertise in-house. So I don't think we'll need the professional training to bring in future coaches now that there's really good online sources and that we're learning from each other. And of course, anything about heat pumps, if we want to go deep, we talk to the folks at the Heat Smart Alliance, because they're able to go deeper into technical questions on heat pumps than we can.
And then I can, and I'm one of the coaches. But I would like to see, I will initiate, I guess, contact with someone in Acton about getting a coach training for just us regular people. Okay, Deborah Symes says I should talk to her. Okay, that's good. And the second question, sorry for hogging the mic, is I'm sure you've noticed that when, I don't mean it personally, but when Acton and Stow talk about what they've managed to accomplish, it's quite different than what Hudson and Maynard have accomplished. And the main message I want to talk about here is, you know, we have a lot of working class people in our town, and when we did the Heat Smart program with Stow, and it was a huge effort, and we did a lot of finding ways to contact low and middle income people to get some financial relief. But it's really so expensive. It's just such a big investment up front. And I don't know really what the question is, but I want to know the answer to how to address that difference, because it's giant. It's giant. And, you know, we're fabulous in Green Hudson, aren't we, Pat? But, you know, people can't afford it, or not everyone can.
I guess I want to kind of piggyback on her comments. I work as a painting contractor, and I shoehorn conversations about clean energy, EVs, heat pumps, solar, aggregated power, all that kind of thing, trying to make the case that it's urgent and that there are ways to pursue things that save money in the long run. As I understand it, there's a Massachusetts 0% clean energy loan, which might address some of her concerns. But I could tell you countless stories of having had conversations with homeowners. A couple spring to mind. There was a woman in Acton with maybe a 30-year-old house who was coming around to need a new furnace and new AC. And this leads to my key point. Her contractor convinced her to do oil and an air conditioner. So number one, the air conditioner didn't have what I understand is maybe a $300 add-on to be a heat pump. I don't know how the contractor didn't say, you know, you ought to spend an extra $300 and then you can heat in October, November, and early December, and in March and April, and not have to depend entirely on oil. Or based on new technology, you could just do a heat pump and you'd be all set. Your house is only 30 years old, the insulation's pretty good, we could address things here or there. There's a couple other stories. A woman had a house built in 1980 with just a heat pump, and they hated it. They had a wood stove. It was just painful for them. They got a contractor in. He said, well, if you hated the heat pump, you can do oil and an air conditioner. Third incident, someone brought probably a $15,000 gas line in from the street, 300 or 400 feet down their long driveway, to put gas in. They had just bought a house that they were planning on staying in for 25 or 30 years. They didn't even have a family yet. The air conditioner was breaking down. The oil furnace was old. Eversource convinced them to do a gas furnace and not do a heat pump. Mm-hmm. And I had been trying to persuade her before she went through with this, and I spoke mainly with the woman, with the wife, that they should get a heat pump size to the house for when they do all their insulation upgrades, so that when the oil furnace craps out on them, they can just remove the chimney and have the oil furnace hauled away. So I guess the bottom line of my question is, it seems like a lot of these contractors, and I sympathize with this, they stick with what they know. So they work with stuff that's worked for 20 years, but heat pumps are way better than they were 20 years ago. So they're lacking training. I know there's a guy named Nate the House Whisperer, who's a HVAC guy, who's trying to make the business case for contractors that they can make a profitable business out of encouraging people to do clean energy upgrades. So I'm wondering if there's something with some of these energized Stow or Acton or Maynard or Hudson that would incorporate, that would bring the contractors in to get them trained so that they're giving better advice and they're not misleading people and then locking them into 30 years of emissions that we can't afford, when they could, especially with the zero interest loan, people could afford it based on that zero interest loan, and it would pay off. I did all these upgrades of 11 or 12 or 13 years ago. The solar took maybe 12 or 13 years to pay off. That was the last one I did. The ground source heat pump paid off in 6 or 7 years. I pay maybe $500 a year to heat my house. It would be $3,000 with oil. So energy cost me under $1,000 a year. I invested, I don't know what it is, 130 grand. It all paid off. People don't get the right advice, and I think the contractors are the ones that are really the biggest liability. So I don't know who wants to. Yeah, you seem like you're a pretty good expert on that.
A great opportunity we've had a couple of times is when there's changes in building code, because the developers need to know the details of what's changed.
That was a big benefit for me.
Yeah, so we worked with, Acton worked with Lexington and Arlington and, not sure what the fourth town was, but on a training specifically targeted to developers, talking about the building codes, and then at the same time talking about, here's your choices. Heat pumps work now. There's cold climate heat pumps, and and you have a single system, not two different systems. It's going to save money for you in building, and it's going to save the operating cost for the customers. So that was folded into the conversation, but there was something upfront useful that brought the builders to the table, which was the training on the building codes.
Is there some kind of incentive program to encourage contractors to come in?
No, they're just getting the data. Yeah.
There certainly should be, and thank you, Ed, for your comments, and for Jeanette, especially the class focus, because I will say I think that's really where a lot of the backlash is happening now around affordability, is working class people saying, well, I'm not benefiting from mass save, or I can't put up XYZ amount of money to get to these lower costs. And I think the state needs to do better outreach and also contract with low-income advocacy groups, especially groups where representing immigrants or people's first language is in English, to do the kind of outreach. Because I think the state auditor, to her credit, did an audit, I think, of a mass save or maybe another program, saying that disproportionately most of that money goes to middle class or upper middle class households. So a lot of work left to do on that.
I think the question is, is there anything else to address the affordability? Because the one thing is, a 0% loan, is great, but if you can't put the upfront money in, that really doesn't help.
Yeah, I just want to chime in here. Yeah, something I notice, especially in Hudson, I walk a lot of places. I live near the downtown, and I notice, especially in the multifamily houses, the landlords tend to just cut down the trees. They don't want to deal with the leaves or the branches or the insurance, but then that creates heat islands. They're just seas of concrete. So like encouraging tree plantings in the town or putting funds for that will lower costs for those people for heating and cooling over time. But that's just one solution.
That 0% loan does not allow lower income people to do a zero down, pay it over time off of the savings on the electricity?
Well, it's still I think it's the added monthly cost of you're paying off, even though it's 0%, you still have to, have 3 I was just saying with the 0% loan, I think the issue is, there's no interest on it, but you still need to come up with, say, like $300 every month to be able to pay off the loan. Like the monthly bill for the loans is still expensive, and it's about $10,000, which is nothing to sneeze at. So. I guess I'll ask my questions. I have some quick ones and some not so quick ones. First question for the groups, just when you are translating materials, how are you doing that? Are you finding, is there like a source that you're using, or are you finding community members to translate those materials into Spanish or Portuguese? My second question is, in terms of having drought issues, and I'm not sure that this even affects our region, but as AI data centers are coming into fore, is there legislation around protecting water and around AI data centers? And the third one, and this is more of a comment, but I really would love to talk to the other groups about how we can share resources and share the events promotion and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess so with translations in Hudson, we have several people in town hall that are bilingual, and they just handle it for us. I don't know how it is in other towns. And the Board of Health. The Board of Health. Yeah, the Board of Health helps us a lot, and I don't know where Lauren goes, but it's someone in town hall. So.
Any other comments?
Just any
Yeah.
answer about the AI data. That's what
AI data
center.
AI data center.
Jamie, you probably have a better answer than I do, but what I've heard is that Massachusetts and New England in general are not particularly good regions for siting an AI data center.
Yeah.
The electric rates are very high, as you said, the water usage. So, what I'm hearing is that obviously that's become a huge issue in other regions of the country, but I don't anticipate that it's going to be a big issue in New England or Massachusetts in particular. Jamie, you may.
Yeah, I would just concur on that. I think there's been some chatter out in Holyoke of some sort of data center, and then you get to where, Holyoke, very high unemployment rate, opportunity to create jobs, and so that's the, in some ways the pull. And Holyoke is a muni, so they have lower rates. But other than that, I haven't heard of any being proposed, so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question.
I was just going to say that the state encourages growth, but at the same time, it doesn't recognize the limits on growth relative to biodiversity and the water use. So when you are conserving your water, that water is being used by developers. We're already building 3 times the amount of housing that we need for immigrants. And so there's a ton of empty housing. We just can't afford it. And the water is being used up. So there will never be out of the drought until we actually recognize the limits of the biosystems and keep to it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I want to say how much I appreciated the fact that we all got together tonight. And great questions, great replies. Thank you all. I hope we can do this again before another year goes by.
I'd like to take a moment and just thank our panelists for their comments and taking the time to do that. So thank our panelists. I would also like to thank Jamie, who is always willing to show up at events and as our great representative to try and navigate the challenges in the State House. So, and thank you all.